Mike Davis, a ninth grade English teacher, has been working with his students on To Kill a Mockingbird, a classic of modern American literature. The novel is renowned for dealing with serious issues such as prejudice, racial inequality, legal integrity, and the loss of innocence. It is a staple of the curriculum in our country's schools. The class discussed these and other issues on Monday and Tuesday of the current week, and Mike now wants to use it as a vehicle to help his students understand figurative language and help them meet the Common Core standard, determine the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in the text, including figurative and connotative meanings. On Wednesday, Mike describes and provides examples of figurative language, with particular focus on the concepts personification, metaphor, and simile. For homework, he asked his students to find in the novel at least 2 examples of each of the 3 forms of figurative language, and after his beginning of class review, he now has the students working in groups to share and evaluate their examples.
Here's one of mine. On page 100, it says, the day after Jem's 12th birthday, his money was burning up his pocket, so he headed for town in the early afternoon. This is an example of a metaphor.
Why?
Because it is impossible for money to burn in your pocket when you want to spend it so badly.
But a metaphor has to make a comparison, and nothing is being compared in the sentence. I think a better example is on page 48, where it says, summer was our best season. It was 1,000 colors in a parched landscape. Summer is being compared to 1,000 colors, but it's a figurative comparison, not a real or literal comparison, so it's a metaphor.
What do you mean?
Well, figurative language deals with words that exaggerate or change actual meanings of words. They're not saying that summer literally is 1,000 colors, so it's figurative. Here's another one. On page 276, it says, saying that blaming Jem for Mr. Ewell's death is like shooting a mockingbird, and it uses the word like in the statement. That's how similes are different from metaphors.
So, what's Steve's example?
I think it's personification. When it says, his money was burning up his pocket, they are sort of attaching human character to money, and that's what personification does.
Wait, this is a little too much. You're talking about literal and figurative and metaphor and simile and personification. Mr. Davis went a little too fast for me when he was explaining it, so I got sort of mixed up.
How do you know all this?
My English teacher last year loved this stuff, and she was always making up metaphor and simile examples. We did it all year, and she even used examples in history and science and everything.
Wait, let me write this stuff down, so I'll remember it better later.
Let's consider these questions related to the students' thinking. First, why was Miguel able to make connections in the different examples that Patty and Steve were initially unable to? Second, why did Patty say this is a little too much, and why did Mr. Davis seem to go a little too fast for her when he was explaining figurative language, so she got sort of mixed up? Lastly, what effect will Steve's decision to write some of this stuff down have on his learning? To answer this question, we have to look back at the principles of cognitive learning theory. One of the principles states that learning and development depends on learners' experiences. Miguel had more experience with figurative language than did either Patty or Steve. When Steve asked,
how do you know all this?
Miguel said,
my English teacher last year loved this stuff, and she was always making up metaphor and simile examples. We did it all year, and she even used examples in history and science and everything.
Another way to think about this is with driving. According to Kine and Saley, when you first learned how to drive, it was probably with a car that was automatic. Suppose that one day your friend asks you to help him move, but he only has a truck with a stick shift. Through practice, you are finally able to drive his truck with ease. Because of your experience, you know how to drive vehicles with stick shifts, and your driving skills are more fully developed than they would have been if you didn't have this experience. To answer this next question, we have to think back about the limitations of working memory. Cognitive load is the amount of mental activity imposed on working memory. The reason why Patty said,
this is a little too much,
was because Mr. Davis's explanations imposed too heavy of a cognitive load on her working memory, and some of the information was lost before she could make sense of it. In John Sweller's application of the cognitive load theory, he discusses how combining an illustration with text and labels forces the learner to look back and forth between the specified parts of the illustration and the text. If the diagram is self-explanatory, processing the text unnecessarily increases working memory load. If the information could be replaced with numbered arrows in the labeled illustration, the learner could concentrate better on learning the content from the illustration alone. Alternatively, if the text is essential to intelligibility, placing it on the diagram rather than separated will reduce cognitive load associated with searching for relations between the text and the diagram. Finally, we'll answer the last question by looking back on metacognition. Metamemory is knowledge and regulation of memory strategies and is another form of metacognition. Steve demonstrated metamemory when he said,
Wait, let me write this stuff down, so I'll remember it better later.
Realizing that he needed to write down some information and in doing so will improve his encoding and increase his learning. The more metacognitive he becomes, the greater impact it will have. Metamemory also affects learning in regards to cognitive overload. Children and adults experience cognitive overload, like we saw with Patty. Metamemory, which includes the regulation of memory strategies, enables learners to use available cognitive resources more efficiently because they are better able to sequence, plan, and monitor learning tasks. It is important for educators to grasp why cognitive views of learning are crucial in the classroom setting. Understanding how students make connections, remember information, and regulate their cognition will improve your teaching skills to help you guide your students in becoming successful learners.